morning, lovelies! Today we are talking about the worst writing advice when it comes to romance stories and romantic subplots, aka the easiest video script I have written in months. If you're a regular on this channel, then you're probably familiar with my disdain for all things romantic, really. However, I am not completely against romance stories or romantic subplots. They're like coffee for me. It is not my first choice. I'm more of a tea girl. 90% of the time, I do not crave it or want it in any way. But every now and then, I do like a good cup, and I can appreciate the taste of coffee skillfully integrated into a more complex drink or dessert, so long as it is not overwhelming it or overpowering it. What I'm trying to say is romance and romance stories, they're not usually for me, but I respect their place in the literary world. Also, my mother has landed on the New York Times bestseller list several times for paranormal romance, and I'd rather not be cut out of her will just yet. What I do not respect is people giving or encouraging bad writing tips on how to make these romances more appealing, because they just don't work. So let's get down to it. Number 1, they must be a cis-het couple. That is cisgender heterosexual, that is straight and not trans. If you are writing queer characters, then there must be a strict narrative reason for it, like overcoming homophobia or getting a cis-het character to overcome homophobia. You can't have a queer couple just exist the way they do in real life. Ugh. Do cis-hets, aka cisgender heterosexuals, make up the majority of the human species? Yes. Do they have to make up the entirety of our literature? No! Queer people are more common than you think. You're looking at one right now. We do not exist solely for a greater narrative purpose. We simply just are. The only reason to continue excluding us from mainstream works is to get that sweet, sweet homophobia money. If you're considering writing your romantic pairing queer in some way, but you don't really want to because you're afraid of offending the wrong people or losing out on sales or whatever, I encourage you to give it a shot. I have multiple videos on this channel explicitly about how to write diverse characters and minority characters when you are not a part of that minority, so give them a go. It's a good place to start. Number 2, even if your book is not actually a romance, be it primarily a sci-fi adventure, a gothic horror novel, or whatever other genre, if there are 2 characters of disparate gender who are not related to each other in your story, then you must put them in a romantic subplot, no matter what. There are few things that I hate more in this world, with the burning passion of 1,000 suns, than the blanket assumption that romantic love is universal. That is one thing that all people desire all the time, and that if 2 characters or just 2 people in general of the same age and disparate gender meet, then they are destined to at least try a romance, and every other option is just infeasible. I just don't like it. People lose out on incredible friendships, on incredible sibling-like or adopted family-like type of relationships because they think it has to be romantic. And it's just sad. Romantic subplots take up at least 80% of our media, and that is a conservative estimate, even when they really should not. So when we see it everywhere, we as authors feel pressured to include it in some way, even if the story can just do fine without it. It sucks that the pressure exists, but I implore you to resist it. A lot of authors think that they have to do the romantic subplot to show that their characters have arrived at their happy ending, but there are plenty of other ways to show that your character has made it as their happy ending. And you can do that without throwing a love interest at them, especially if your story's main genre is not romance. Frankly, a person's relationship status gives very little indication of their state of happiness. I genuinely want you to challenge yourself to write a story without romance. If it honestly feels like something is missing, or that some of the characters' actions just do not make sense without that type of romance, well then congrats, your story actually requires a romantic subplot. Start writing. But I'll bet at least a solid half of all stories just don't need a love arc. Number 3, if you did not plan for 2 specific characters to be in a relationship, but all of your fans are pressuring you for it, then you should totally give in and develop that relationship. Even if it makes absolutely no sense for the rest of your story you have planned, or even for those two characters. Again, we are feeling the pressure of a society that is absolutely obsessed with cishet romance. Now, there is a balance to be struck here. On a certain level, yes, your job as an author is to give the fans what they want. But what they want is a compelling story. Making your characters act out of character and throwing the rest of the story in disarray just to get them to bone is not going to deliver a compelling story. You're betraying yourself that way. And you're really only going to be satisfying a minority of your audience. If you stick to your guns, yes, some fans will complain. They're always going to complain, but the majority of them will appreciate you sticking to your planned story. I really appreciated the creators of Avatar: Last Airbender for not giving into fan pressure here. Even when the show very clearly articulated from episode 1 that Aang and Katara were eventually going to end up together, fans were shipping Zutara almost as soon as those two characters were introduced, and they still are. It drives me nuts, actually, because frankly, it just does not make sense for those two characters to be together in a romantic relationship. Their chemistry is far more sibling-like. In fact, the creators actually poked fun at the fandom in the Ember Island Players episode. There's a level of trust that fans put into creators. They trust you to give them a good story that will leave them feeling satisfied in some way. And one of the biggest ironies in life, I think, is that we cannot give them the same type of trust. They're not writers. They're not the writers of this story. They don't know it nearly as well as you do. So they don't get final say as to which characters wind up in which relationships. And if they're not satisfied with the ultimate relationship situation, that's what fanfiction is for. Number 4, skip right to the good stuff. There's no need to set up the characters as individuals before they meet and then have them grow and change together as the relationship advances. One coffee date is enough for us to hear wedding bells. Okay, I am a romantic asexual. That means I do not experience romantic or sexual attraction, like, at all. And since I am romance repulsed most of the time, that means I don't really do relationships. I tried it, didn't really like it, bought the t-shirt. So, you're gonna have to help me out here a little bit. You guys don't actually move that fast, right? I'm pretty sure in all of the real-life accounts that I've heard of romantic relationships, successful ones anyway, that it generally takes at least a few months to a few years of actually getting to know the other person before you start seriously planning a future with them. Look, there are exceptions. My grandparents, especially if your story takes place like in wartime or some other large-scale disaster that puts time pressure on the characters and makes them genuinely think, fuck it, we're probably gonna die tomorrow anyway, let's get married today. Except, even if you write it that way, we, the audience, still need to get to know these characters. We need to know who they are as individuals, what their lives are like outside of their romantic partner, so that we can see what kind of effect this partner is having on them. Is it a positive impact? They're actually happier and more confident with this person? Great, we're gonna root for it. Is it a negative impact? Is one of them actually bad news? Or is it possibly even abusive? Well, we're gonna hope that they get their heads out of their asses and break up. If these characters are blitzing through a relationship, that could have some serious consequences for them as individuals, for their narrative arcs, and for the story as a whole. And that could be explored. What is the reality of marrying someone you barely know? What's the reality of getting together with someone that you only just met in a highly dangerous situation? That could be a very interesting angle to take. Also, slow burns are a thing. A very popular thing. If you don't know, slow burn just means that it takes a while to build up to the actual romance and big kiss moment. Done well, a slow burn will take the time to not only build the romantic tension between these two characters, but also the romantic feelings in the characters themselves. They probably don't even realize that they're falling for each other until at least the halfway point, even though it's really obvious to literally everyone else. Building on a pre-existing friendship is pretty common with this trope, since it can take time for those to evolve in real life too. Sometimes you get arranged marriages where the two characters actually do fall in love, but that usually happens about 300 pages after the wedding day. Even Beauty and the Beast, the original, was a slow burn, with Beast growing his romantic feelings at about the halfway point, and Belle not falling in love until he A. releases her from imprisonment, B. spares Gaston's life, and C. dies. I know it's kind of a hot take here, but this is not actually Stockholm Syndrome. Falling in love with your captors is not the actual definition. Stockholm Syndrome is not an actual mental disorder, it's not even really real, and Belle proves that she is perfectly capable of leaving whenever she damn well pleases the very night she promises to stay. But, that's for another video. Number 5, even though it's obvious that these two characters are meant to be together, you have to drag out that relationship drama. You've got 300 pages of plot to fill after all. And sure, you could focus that time on the epic fantasy adventure or sci-fi political drama that your book is supposed to be about, but at least half that time needs to be dedicated to your characters arguing and getting jealous and pining and doing the will they won't they dance until they finally kiss at the end. And also defeat the bad guys, I guess. You can always tell when a writer is including a scene in the story to do just this. It does not move the plot forward. It doesn't typically give us any more information about these characters than we already know. It barely pushes the relationship forward. It's literally just there as a space filler and to tease the shippers. That's it. Now, while I did just spend a hot minute defending slow burns because they're usually my favorite form of romance stories, there is an argument to be made for the other side here. If two characters have instant chemistry with each other, you can have them jump into a relationship or into bed before chapter 1 if you want. Nothing's stopping you. There are plenty of other hurdles and conflicts that you can throw at them, especially if they're just starting a new relationship. The whole point of dating is to get to know each other, figuring out if you actually fit together and how they would fit into your future. Lore Olympus had Persephone and Hades making out and declaring their love for each other way sooner than I thought they would, but it works, and there is still plenty of conflict. Before getting together, they largely had to deal with Persephone's commitment to be a maiden at the behest of her overbearing mother in order to get her scholarship, the trauma of her assault, and Hades' self-hatred. While getting together, they had a whole trial to get through, mostly thanks to Zeus being a little bitch and feeling insecure about his rule as king. After getting together, they had to deal with Kronos, and we had a nice reverse damsel where Persephone saved Hades instead of the other way around. And now, we still have to deal with Demeter's overprotectiveness, the hazards of suddenly becoming the new queen of the underworld, and oh yeah, Apollo is still a thing. Through all of this, Hades and Persephone are growing as individuals while their relationship is growing too, with advances and setbacks. If you want a really good example of a healthy, developing romance with clear communication from all sides in fiction, you want Lore Olympus. Number 6, if you really need to spice things up, throw in a competitor. Everyone knows that love triangles are a surefire way to keep audiences engaged. I know that people who like love triangles exist. What I don't know is why. Most of the time it's just thrown in there for cheap drama. Almost none of the time is polyamory suggested as a possible solution. The person being pursued by the two other characters always comes across as a jerk who plays with other people's emotions and or an idiot who just can't make up their mind, so I can't even root for them. Having said that, there is a market for love triangles. You just have to be careful with how you write them. And unfortunately, I am the last person to tell you how to do that, because I hate this trope so fucking much. I will not touch a story that has a love triangle in it. It is just a surefire way to turn me off, with very few exceptions. Number 7, in order to prove his love for her, he must continue to ask her out even after she says no multiple times. He has to wear her down like a river cutting a canyon. This is one of the most damaging ideologies that exists in the real world and seeps into our fiction. The idea that if a girl turns down a guy, he just has to keep trying until she eventually says yes. Guys, she said no. That's your cue to back off. The only reason she's saying yes is because she is exhausted of refusing you and or scared of what will happen, of what you will do to her if she says no again. If she does change her mind on her own, she'll come to you. But you have no right to pressure her into dating you. And making your male hero do it in your story makes other people normalize or even idolize such behavior. Oh, but persistence shows that he's confident and strong and knows that they're meant to be together. No, it shows that he's a creep and she should get a restraining order. Number 8, if the villain is one gender and the hero is another, you have to do an enemies to lovers. Your fans are going to ship them together anyways and write tons of very questionable fanfiction, so make it canon, no matter what horrible things the villain has done to the hero. When someone tells me that they really like enemies to lovers trope, I have to resist the urge to ask if they're going to therapy. Yes, the trope can work. Usually when it does, the enemies is more like rivals, and there's no real villain here. They just really didn't like each other at first, they sniped at each other and traded insults for a while before realizing that the other person is really cute. Now, for the time that enemies to lovers is in speculative fiction setting and involves an actual villain who has done some seriously evil shit, then it needs to be paired with either a very convincing redemption arc or a very compelling, tragic fallen hero arc. But it can happen. But most of the time I see this, the villain's redemption arc is paper thin, almost non-existent. We're supposed to believe that the hero is going to accept a simple, "I'm sorry for killing your father, but you're cute and that's why I joined the good guys," as a reason to jump into bed with this guy. No, we need at least a full season of groveling before we can even talk about a romantic relationship. Number 9, always pair the spares. It's the only way we know that any of these characters have a happy ending. I hate the pair the spares trope so much. More so than the love triangle. If you don't know, pair the spares is when the writer takes all of the surviving characters who are not already in a romantic relationship, the spares, and gives them romantic relationships, or at least strongly hints that they're going to start one. Even if those two characters have not shared more than 5 minutes of dialogue with each other, even if they've just met. Not only is it insulting and exclusionary to people who are aromantic and don't want anything to do with that shit, it's also bad writing. Like, really bad. It bogs down the back half of your story, especially Act 3, which is your climax, aka the most intense part of your story. You don't want to waste time playing bonus matchmaker here. And again, being in a relationship does not guarantee personal happiness. Instead, show us how those spares have achieved their personal goals or are well on their way to doing so. Look, you get one. You can pair exactly one set of spares in addition to the accomplishment of their personal goals. Everyone else needs a more creative happy ending, no exceptions. And number 10, if you write a sequel, make sure that the main couple is broken up or having severe relationship problems. Writing a healthy, happy relationship where the couple is a unit and they figured out how to resolve their conflicts and have continued to grow together, who wants to read about that? Maybe all the people who shipped this couple? I genuinely do not understand why so many writers do this. You put so much time and effort into building up this romantic relationship between your two leads and getting us to root for them to make it. And then suddenly book 2 or season 2 or movie 2 comes along and they broke up off screen for no apparent reason. Oh, but now they're forced to work together again. Will their love bloom once more? Oh, we're just repeating all the exact same romantic story beats from the first time around. Let this couple be a couple. Alright, there's plenty of narrative conflict that you can still throw at them. Plenty of sources of drama here and tension to get your audience at the edge of their seat. One of them wanting to propose is pretty common. One of them wanting kids comes up sometimes. One of them thinking that the other is cheating is also common, though not always usually well executed. It's often just there for cheap drama, but it does work sometimes. Sometimes there are no problems within the relationship itself, but they're just dealing with a bunch of external threats, only with a little more hand-holding and PDA than in the first book. If you're a writer with a manuscript that needs some polishing before you send it off to editors or publishers, I do offer professional manuscript critiques. So if you started sweating at any point in this video, hit me up. The website link is in the description. More bad advice here, good writing advice there. I will see you next time. Bye, lovelies.